Good morning, everyone. Dan Bates, President and CEO of the Greater Hamilton Chamber of Commerce, and we are really glad you could join us this morning for another episode of Coffee and Conversations. So today we're going to be hearing from Jeff Boyle, a local realtor, broker, and short-term rental owner. So he's going to be talking to you about some of the challenges and benefits with that, and hopefully some trends that are happening in that industry. So we are on Zoom, so you can ask questions of the speaker as we go forward. I'm sure Jeff won't mind if you either put something in the chat box or just interrupt him with a question. Those of you who are on Facebook Live, type your questions in, and Laura or Tiffany, whichever one's doing that, will repeat those questions to the speaker so we can get them answered for you. So we're going to do self-introductions now that you know who I am and find out who everybody else is. So Gino, I'm turning it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Dan. My name is Gino McGowan. I am the new Director of Member Relations. I think it's like my 8th week, 7th week, something like that. I'm getting to the point where, you know, like how you see people have a new baby and they say, oh yeah, my baby is 27 weeks or something like that. So I'm going to stop saying that eventually, but I'll go around by the pictures I see. We'll start with Dawn.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dawn Richburg. Today is my first meeting that I've attended. I just started with Absolute Title Agency as a marketing and closing rep. So Jen is the owner of Absolute Title, and she encouraged me to just kind of get more involved with the Hamilton Chamber. So here I am.
Welcome, welcome. It looked like you're in your car, so hopefully you are stopped somewhere.
I parked, yes. Safe driving over here. So yes, I parked.
Outstanding, outstanding. Carol, if you be more than happy to say a couple words and welcome.
Thank you again. I'm a newly retired registered nurse, second career registered nurse. And I'm trying to get more involved in whatever floats my boat within the community. So I thank you.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, I will go to my buddy, Chris. How are you?
Good, how are you this morning? So I'm Chris Cannell, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Hamilton City Schools.
Welcome, welcome. I will come back to my esteemed colleagues. I'll go to Michael.
Good morning, Michael Sutter. Hi, how you doing?
Good morning, welcome.
So I'm with a company called Tech, and we help companies reduce their IT hardware spending by providing business class computer hardware, right? Laptops, desktops, and monitors. And on the other side of it, we're helping companies with sustainability and making sure that equipment doesn't end up in a landfill, and that data is properly eradicated, and companies have their certificates. So it's the whole chain of custody thing, right? And just making sure that hey, we're all doing the right thing. So cool, and I appreciate being on this call, and thank you very much.
Outstanding. Okay, I hope I don't butcher up your name. Bao?
Oh, you got it. You got it.
Right.
This is Bao with Edward Jones in German Village. Thanks for giving me a heads up yesterday, so I knew to register for today.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for joining. Laura, you want to say a couple words?
I can. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Merrill with the Greater Hamilton Chamber.
Thanks, Laura. And my good buddy, Tiffany.
Hello, I'm Tiffany Grubb, Director of Marketing at the Greater Hamilton Chamber.
Outstanding. Okay, so you met our team, you met our esteemed leader, and now, Jeff, I will turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not muted. You can all hear me, right? So my name is Jeff Boyle, and I am a local realtor here in Hamilton. I'm with Keller Williams. We have been located in Hamilton, our office, for, I think, since 2016. Prior to that, we did a bunch of business in Hamilton, but I was at the main office out in Westchester. So we started investing in real estate actually in 2020. So haven't been investing super long. We have 14 long-term rentals, some residential, some commercial, and we have 2 short-term rentals that are up and running right now, which we are super excited about. It is a whole different monster than long-term rentals. So I guess before I get started, I do have a quick presentation that I can go through and just kind of outline some of the basics about short-term rentals. But do you guys have any specific questions for me that I want to make sure that I cover during this? That's a no. Okay.
Maybe we'll find out when we get there, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll ask
So
a quick question, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead.
When do you ever foresee the cost of building coming down?
Man, that's a loaded question. You know, I don't see it coming down a whole lot. Part of the issue of the cost increase is logistics, and I don't see that getting better anytime soon. So just the supply chain alone is causing an issue on that end. And then on the other end, the builders, they can't find enough people to work for them. So it's just one of those things. It's a double whammy right now. And in the foreseeable future, I don't see that getting either one of those situations getting a whole lot better. So the raw materials, yes, the cost will fluctuate some. Lumber will come down and go up. It's not going to come down a drastic amount, just because the demand is so high. As anything else, it's supply and demand. So as long as the demand remains high for new construction, the cost of lumber is going to stay pretty high. Just before we get started, the short-term part is a market thing in general. You know, we hear a lot about kind of a housing bubble or high prices are going to drop. We don't foresee prices dropping anywhere in the near future. It is strictly supply and demand. We don't have near enough houses on the market now for the amount of buyers and the amount of demand that's out there. And there aren't enough houses. There's nowhere for all of that extra inventory to come from. Builders can't build it fast enough. You have people that are sitting on 2% and 3% and 4% interest rates that don't want to sell because they'd have to buy it 6%, which is about what it is now. So they're staying where they're at. And then you have like big investors, hedge funds, those types of companies coming in and buying properties also, which even suppresses the housing inventory even more. So we don't expect prices to come down really anywhere in the near future in this area. So I think Dave Ramsey said it a month ago, now is the best time in the next 5 years to buy. And I don't think he's entirely incorrect in that. So that being said, I don't foresee costs of building coming down anytime soon either. It's going to remain relatively where it's at, pretty consistent. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, unfortunately, but
yeah, it's not what you wanted to hear, I'm sure.
Hey, Jeff, I think Val, you have your hand held up. You have a question?
I do. You don't
Yeah, go
have
ahead.
to hit it now, but I would love to hear as you get into the rental. I think a lot of people are a primary homeowner and perhaps they don't have the right scorecard or rubric when it comes to like the investment property. So I love to hear from that lens, as most primary homeowners aren't able to pivot from their owning their own home to owning a investment property.
So I think I heard 2 questions in there. I just want to make sure I have them right. The second question was, how do you jump from being a primary homeowner to an investor? Is that correct?
Or even if people are interested, I want to make sure I understand the scorecard. I think a lot of people think I'm just a primary homeowner and they're not able to pivot properly to an investment standpoint.
So we're going to actually go over a little bit about some of the metrics you need to look at when you're looking at a short-term rental investment. So yes, we will go over that. Any other questions? All right, so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my screen. I'll go through the short presentation. I'm sure that's going to bring more questions out to the forefront. So we'll get started here. During the presentation, I'll just talk. If you have questions, just raise your hand or type them in the chat or just blurt them out. You don't have to wait till the end, because if you wait till the end, you might forget what the question was. All right, can everybody see?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good here.
Do you see the main screen, or do you see the one with 2 shots on it?
We've
Two
got 2
shots on it.
shots.
Okay. Let me see.
There you go.
So you're good now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I already introduced myself. Short-term rentals, most people think Airbnb when they hear short-term rentals, right? In reality, Airbnb was probably just the first big company that started pushing short-term rentals. Short-term rentals have actually been around for a long time. If you think about like Hocking Hills or Gatlinburg, some of those touristy areas where people have been doing this for decades. So while Airbnb is new, short-term rentals aren't necessarily new to our marketplace. They are to our personal marketplace, but not in general. So what is a short-term rental? Short-term rental is defined as a rental that's typically any residential home unit or accessory building for a short period of time. Then you ask, what is a short period of time? And it's usually 30 days or less. That's kind of where the short-term rental market falls. When you get above 30 days, it would fall into a midterm or long-term rental, depending on how what that lease is like. When you look at short-term rental market, there's actually a bunch of different platforms that are out there that you can put your short-term rentals on. Here are some of the main ones. Airbnb, obviously, Vrbo. They don't like it when you call it VRBO. It's Vrbo. Booking.com, Expedia.com. Believe it or not, the Marriott has a short-term rental arm. It's Homes and Villas by Marriott. And then Furnished Findings is a little bit more of a midterm, but I put it in here because it does fall under short-term also. That's mostly for, not mostly, a lot of like traveling nurses use Furnished Findings. The difference between Furnished Findings and the rest of these, Furnished Finding deals a lot with midterm. So anywhere from 30 to 90, 120 days. Really not much any longer than 120 days though. So again, that's a lot used for traveling nurses coming in and out, or corporate executives that come in for a month or two, something like that. That's what Furnished Findings is kind of geared towards. So then we're going to talk a little bit about how do you research a short-term rental? So STR, short-term rental, LTR, long-term rental. There's a couple different ways to do this. So you need to look for a good city to invest in a short-term rental. And I say that because there are some cities that are not short-term rental friendly. They are passing regulations against them, or they've had regulations against them in the past. You have to analyze the neighborhood that you're going to purchase it in. Is it a good neighborhood for it? Does it allow it? Is there an HOA that would not allow short-term rentals? Are the neighbors going to be upset if you do it? The neighbors can cause a lot of havoc if you just go in and buy something and you start to run a short-term rental and they're not happy with it. You want to look at population growth. You want to look at economic growth and tourism. Those are kind of the main things as far as what the area that you're going to want to look at. And then when you look at the key metrics for the actual property to consider, you want to look at the occupancy rate for the area. You want to look at the average nightly rate that those short-term rentals are getting in that area. You want to look at the rental unit size. Are the 2 bedrooms the most popular? Is it a 3 bedroom? Is it a 5 bedroom? Or do you have big parties coming in on a regular basis, or is it a lot of couples coming in? So you don't need the 4 and 5 and 6 bedroom houses. You want to look at that market and see what is renting at a high level and what is not. You want to look at the rental growth. Is it growing too fast? Is it not growing fast enough? These are all things that are extremely important that you got to know before you jump in. You got to know, is it a seasonal location? If you look at like Hocking Hills and Gatlinburg, those two that I used earlier, those are not seasonal. You have a little bit higher and a little bit lower times of the year, but they're basically booked year round. You have, when you look at Hamilton here, there is some seasonality to it. Spooky Nook will probably change that to a certain degree since they will have tournaments year round now, but there is some seasonality to this. When you look at like beach vacation rentals, I'm sure you've all looked in the summertime, the rates are a lot higher than they are in the wintertime. That's the seasonality part of it. You've got to know that, and you've got to take that into consideration when you're purchasing that property. When you look at average nightly rate, occupancy rate, to know whether or not you're going to make enough money to cover all the expenses. And then the amenities is another important thing. When you are going to stay somewhere, you want to look and see what amenities are included. Does it have a game room, a theater room, a pool, a hot tub, a foosball table? Is there an office, like a dedicated office space? If someone's going to be coming in and working, do they need an office space? So the amenities that your property has can play a big role in what its occupancy rate is and what the average nightly rate is for what you're getting when you're renting it, when you rent it out. So how do you research these specific subjects? So the first place I would go is talk to a local realtor, specifically one that invests in short-term rentals. So they're versed in how they work. They know the areas. A lot of times they will know the regulations. They'll know what's coming into the, like what big companies are moving into the area. They'll know kind of economically what's happening. If it's an agent that invests, they should know this stuff. That's where I would start. The other place I would start is a company called airdna.co. That is not a typo. It is not .com. It is airdna.co. And this is a specific platform for short-term rentals to research them. The way this membership works, I think it's $20 a month, and you only get one city. So you got to pick a city that you want to research, and you're going to research that city, and it's a monthly membership. So you can buy it for 30 days. You can research Phoenix, Arizona. And then after 30 days, if you don't like what you see in Phoenix, you can go pick a different city. So then you pick Hamilton if you want to do it locally. And this airdna.co, this is going to tell you what is the occupancy rate, what are the average nightly rates. It'll tell you all of that. It even breaks it down into what properties have what amenities and what amenities are booking more often than others. So it's a great spot to actually look at what is actually happening in the short-term rental market. What it does not get into are what the city regulations are, how taxes are handled, what the different neighborhoods are like. It does not get into that. So you need kind of both of those when you're researching a short-term rental. Let's see. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about hosting yourself versus hiring a property management company. So when you think long-term rental, most investors, especially the mom and pop type investors, they manage it themselves. If you do it correctly, you can manage, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, maybe yourself before it starts to become a lot of your time on a long-term rental. People can pay rent automatically. They can set their bank account to just pay it every month. There's very little time involved as long as there's not issues at the property when you're a long-term rental investor. Where time starts to go up for long-term rentals are when things on the property break down. Your tenants are causing issues. those are the types of things that start to add to the time when you're a long-term renter or long-term investor. Short-term is completely different. So when you self-host, yes, you're saving some expenses because you're not paying a property management company. A PM company on a long-term is going to cost you somewhere between 7 and 10% of the revenue that property brings in. Okay. It's going to be a lot more of a time commitment than what a long-term renter would be. So think about a hotel room. You are literally renting your property out as if it's a 4-bedroom house, as 4 hotel rooms for a family. So everything has to be spick and span. Everything has to look brand new. Everything has to be in place. Everything has to be cleaned. Every time someone moves in or out, you're in there fixing anything that broke, replacing anything that's missing, cleaning everything that they absolutely touched and everything that they didn't touch. Like it's a big time commitment. There are ways with software out there to minimize some of those time commitments, and we'll get into those a little bit. And then when you self-host, there's going to be some inconsistent service between one guest and the next. And it's not intentional, but if this isn't your full-time job, like it would be for a property manager, you're working. And if something comes up, you might not be able to handle it right away, where the week prior might have happened on a weekend and you can handle it differently. So there's going to be some inconsistent levels of service when you're self-hosting a short-term rental, if it's not your full-time job. And believe me, it very well could easily be a full-time job. Okay. When you are self-hosting, your short-term rental has to be local and you have to be in town. What happens with your short-term rental when you go on vacation and something happens and you can't get there? Great question. Okay. You can't manage a short-term rental if you're going to remotely invest in another area that you're not at. You got to be able to go to the property when you're managing it. So those are kind of, when you think about self-hosting, those are the main points I want to bring up, but just know that the time commitment, I could have put that bullet point on there 5 different times, given the level of time commitment that it could be. So when you hire a property management company, you have more expenses. So a PM company for a short-term rental is going to cost you 20 to 25% of your revenue. Okay. So if you remember, the long term is 7 to 10%, a short term is 20 to 25%. Does anyone want to wager a guess on why it's 20 to 25% as opposed to 7 to 10?
Is it because there's more intense cleaning every day?
Just the time commitment in general.
Well, and if I can jump in,
go ahead.
my first career was as an executive in the restaurant and hotel business.
Okay.
And I would tell you, and I may be all wet, that short-term renters, I imagine there are more issues sometimes with short-term renters. Would you agree or not?
I would say there probably are, just because if you think about at a hotel, you literally have people on staff every day that are a maintenance crew. You have cleaners that are there every day.
Correct.
When you're doing a short-term rental, it's a remote house. You don't have staff on site every day. You don't have cleaners there every day. Things break down and you don't know about them right away. You're having lawn managed. Like someone arrives and they forgot or they accidentally locked the doorknob and they lock the smart lock on the way out. And they go to come back in and the smart lock will unlock, but the doorknob's not. So they can't get in the property. So then you got to figure out how to get them in the property. So there's all kinds of different things that come with this. So you're right. There are probably more things that go wrong on our short-term rental than there would be on a hotel. When you look at this, there's a less of a time commitment from you because someone else is handling it. That's what you're paying them for. You've got more consistent service. When you have somebody that does this as a business, everything is the same. They systematize everything. They have everything in place to be able to handle issues to be able to handle cleaning, be able to handle all that stuff. And it's all the same. So from one guest to the next, it's the same process. So it's very consistent, which is a good thing. And the business can run when you're out of town. You've got someone else handling it for you. You don't have to be there all the time. You can go and invest in areas not around here. You can invest in vacation markets. You can invest in higher tourism areas or higher demand areas. As good as Hamilton has been, if you look at occupancy rates in like Gatlinburg, they're 80%. I mean, they literally block days out to be able to go in and do maintenance. We don't have that issue here in Hamilton. We have days that aren't rented, so you can get that done. So there are advantages of hiring a PM company. I'm going to tell you there's a bunch of advantages. The only disadvantage is some of your revenue is paid back to the PM company.
Hey, Jeff,
Yeah, go ahead.
do they, do the PM handle the booking and the collecting of rent and all that kind of stuff for that 25%?
Yeah, so yeah, the short answer is yes, and I'll get into that a little bit here in a few minutes on some of the software that's included. So just again, this is a quick presentation. I hope this brings out more questions, and there's a few more things I'll go over. But when you are thinking about owning and managing a short-term rental, these are the things I want you to think about. The constant notifications and messages to your phone. Okay. And when I say constant, I mean constant. You have lawn people messaging you, you have cleaners messaging you, you have guests messaging you, you have potential guests messaging you, asking questions about the property. You have current guests messaging you, asking, where can I'm looking for this type of food, or do you have any suggestions? You have people inquiring about the price. Can I get a discount? Like, it's nonstop. So your phone is always getting notifications from all different kinds of people. So if you're a type of person that's not good at responding to those or doesn't like to be on the phone, this is not the business for you. You need to leverage this out, okay? One of the metrics that Airbnb uses in your quote unquote superhost status, which you want to get to for numerous different reasons, is how quickly and how often you respond to messages. So if you let messages sit in their app for a day or two, or you don't respond at all, that's going to lower your rating, and it's going to make it harder for you to get that superhost status where they take your property and push it out in front of more people. Okay. So it's extremely important that you do this. So it's bookings, it's questions, it's inquiries, it's complaints, it's all that different stuff constantly coming to your phone. So that's a time commitment in itself. How do you clean the laundry in a house with 9 bedrooms? So in a short-term rental, we have what's called a turnover, a quick turnover. So say someone's checking out at 10 o'clock in the morning and someone's checking in at 3 in the afternoon. There's not enough time. Your cleaner doesn't have enough time to get in there and clean in an hour or two and do enough laundry for 9 beds. 9 beds, 3 bathrooms, all the towels, all the washcloths, all the linens. It can't happen. So what do? You go out and buy 4 or 5 different sets of linens. They take the dirty off, they put the clean on, and then you got to take the laundry somewhere to have it laundered. Or you spend $10,000 for a commercial washer and dryer and put it in the basement and try and do it yourself. Like, that's one of the things a lot of people don't think about, especially for a bigger house. If it's a 1 or 2 bedroom house, yeah, they might be able to do the laundry at the time that they're there cleaning. If it's more than probably 3 or 4 beds, it just isn't happening. There's not enough time to do all that laundry. So that's one of those things where a lot of people don't think about the time commitment for that. Late night calls to fix lockouts, late night calls from neighbors because things are too loud. Like, do you want to get up at 11 o'clock at night? I had an instance just last week. We went to the thing at Basil, the jazz thing at Basil. We were coming home at 10:30 at night, got home at 11, and I got a message. The guest was trying to check in and the smart lock wasn't working. Well, it was working, but whoever was in there last locked the doorknob. So I had to go over there at 11 o'clock at night and let them in. Those are things that you don't think about. Now we have a lockbox on site that I can give as a secondary way in. So little tip if you decide to do this. hiring cleaners, managing cleaners, following up with cleaners. That's a big part of this business. How do you know what to account for when charging for cleaning? If anyone's ever rented an Airbnb, you pay the nightly rate and then there's a cleaning fee that's on top of that. Does that cleaning fee, and do you lose money on it? Do you make money on it? Do you try and get it to where it's covers the cleaning? Does that include the laundry? There's all those different questions. When you have, just with 2 properties, we might have 3 or 4 changeovers in a week. So you're managing cleaners in and out the same day within a couple of hours, 3 or 4 different times in a week. That takes time. Following up with cleaners. How did they do? How did the property look? When someone with Airbnb checks out, you have to leave them a review as the guest. Before you can leave a review, you need to know what the property looked like when the cleaner showed up. Was it in good shape? Did they destroy anything? Did they steal anything? Did they leave it spotless? Like, you got to know that. So you got to follow up with them before you can even leave a review. Purchasing supplies. Think about it. It's like a hotel room. You got to have coffee. You got to have toilet paper, paper towels, detergent. So coffee creamer, like all the different things that go in a house, you're supplying all of them. Okay. Some of these, at least ours, these houses are fully stocked. You could literally live there. Everything they need to live there is supplied for them. That's one of the advantages of booking a short-term rental over a hotel room. A lot of hotel rooms or hotels, they put the bare minimum in the room trying to get you to go down into the restaurant that they have downstairs, right? We have everything that they need. Now they got to go buy their food to make. We have gas grills, we have fire pits, we have literally everything they could need to stay there. Well, someone's got to stock it, someone's got to buy it, someone's got to replace it. You got to be able to store it somewhere. So that's a big piece of this that a PM would do for you. Think about TV remotes. Somebody drops and breaks a TV remote and they need a new one. Ceiling fan remotes, silverware, like all these little things that you don't think about. You're responsible for all of them. You got to replace them. You got to make sure that they're all there. Watching thermostat levels. When it's unoccupied, yes, we're not messing with thermostats when people are there, but when they leave in the middle of the summer, if they leave that air conditioner on 65 degrees and there's not another guest checking in for 3 or 4 days, do you want to cool that empty property for 3 or 4 days at 65 degrees? No, we go in and we put smart thermostats in that I can control from my phone. So all of our short-term rentals, when a guest leaves, you got to remember to go in and you got to go in and change that thermostat. So you're not paying for that for a couple of days. Let's see. Replacing propane tanks and firewood if you have fire pits. Replacing dishes, cups, missing towels, sheets, comforters. It's kind of crazy how a sheet might turn up missing. Like, how does that even happen? But it does. So you just got to know you're going to end up replacing those. Coordinating lawn care, lawn maintenance, snow removal, salt, all that stuff. If a guest is there or checking in, the sidewalk's got to be clear, just like at a hotel. It's got to be all maintained. So you got to have all that stuff in place, and it all costs money to get it done. Touching up paint. I think you would all be shocked at how often we go in and touch up paint on the walls because of dirty fingerprints, or this is no joke. I think our very first guest that we had in our first house I think they had 3 kids with them, gave their kids bags of Cheetos, cut a little hole in the bottom and said, run around the house and touch every wall that you can with your cheesy fingers. We spent 3 hours cleaning walls and touching up paint when those people left. So that's all stuff that you're going to have to think about as a manager of a short-term rental. Just as simple as taking out the trash on trash night. You don't live there. So somebody's got to go over to that property and take the trash out and then go back the next day and pull the trash can back in. Repairs, like all the different things that need to be repaired, it's got to be repaired right away. If you think about staying in a hotel, right? Let me go ahead and close this. If you think about staying in a hotel, if your air conditioner doesn't work for a day of your week, you're not a happy camper. If your Wi-Fi goes out and you don't have Wi-Fi for half your stay because you're only there for 2 days, you're not happy and you're not given a five-star review, right? Everything is based on reviews. So the client or the guest has to be 100% happy with their entire stay, or your reviews drop and you don't get that superhost status. So I mentioned we'll talk a little bit about how to leverage some of this out. There's actually a lot of software for this. So there's a app called Turno, which is for cleaners. So I can go on there and I can say I have a property that is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. It takes about an hour and a half to clean, and I can submit bids. Okay. And all these cleaners will give me a bid to bid the property, to clean the property. Okay. There's a bunch of different things you want to look for when you're trying to select one of those, but then the app helps you manage all those. When you get a booking, you hook it up through the different booking sites, and they automatically get a message saying someone's moving in on this day and out on this day. Can you clean it? And if they say yes, they accept it, it's theirs. If they say no, it goes to your backup cleaner. Okay. So there are ways to minimize coordinating all those cleaners. You still have to do stuff, but it's not as much. There's a app called Price Labs that will help you with dynamic pricing, so you don't necessarily miss out on higher priced weekends because there's big events going on. Their system automatically does dynamic pricing for you, but you still have to be aware of the really big weekends, like graduation weekend. You can get upwards of $1,000 a night for a 2-bedroom house for Miami's graduation weekend. So you can play with prices on that. There's property management software that'll send out automated messages to your guests as they book, as their arrival time gets closer, as they check in, and as their departure time comes. There's all these automated messages that you can send to help with all that. So there is software out there that'll help minimize the amount of time it takes to manage these things, but there's still a lot of time involved. So if you're going to manage it yourself, just know it could very well be a full-time job. It would not be hard to do that, and would almost be necessary if you didn't have all those extra pieces of software in place. The issue with the extra pieces of software, they all cost money. So they all come right off your bottom line, right? So what questions do you guys have for me now that I probably threw a bunch of information at you? What questions you got?
Interestingly enough, I am a property manager in Oxford.
Okay.
And I
So
have
you see some
6.
of this.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
I have 6, but I have long-term renters.
Yep.
And no offense intended, but I rent to real people, not undergraduates.
Yeah.
And we're seeing quite a boom in our segment because there just isn't any. You're either next to students or you're having to buy your own home. So, but have you ever had a long-term rental property, assuming Oxford would allow it in my neighborhood, go to short-term? Have you ever had that experience?
Yes, we have. One of our long-term rental properties, we remodeled and flipped it to a short-term. So here's what we've done. We have actually gone and talked to the neighbors around our short-term rentals, introduced ourselves, told them this is what we're going to do. Here's our contact information. If you ever see any issues, if it ever gets too noisy, please reach out to us first. We've had those conversations. So it's no surprise to anybody around. Obviously, we have the approvals through the city. It's required to get an approval through the city. So we've not really had any of those issues yet, but all the neighbors know this is what's going on. So if they do need to get a hold of us, they know exactly how to do that. Any other questions? I'll tell you the average occupancy rate in Hamilton for short-term rentals, it's actually kind of interesting. A year ago, it was 67%. Now it's about 58%. And it's not because demand has gone down. It's because the number of short-term rentals has gone way up. I think last time I checked, I think we have that amount in Hamilton has doubled over the last 12 to 18 months. The demand is actually up over what it was, but there's so many more short-term rentals out there. I will tell you, we opened one of them on March 1st. And it wasn't until 3 weeks ago that we had a booking for Spooky Nook. Every other booking, it was booked every single weekend. Every other booking was for something other than Spooky Nook. Now that Spooky Nook is ramping up, we're starting to get some of those, but the demand was there even without Spooky Nook from what we're seeing so far, which is interesting. That's not what we were expecting.
Jeff,
Jeff,
that was going to be my question on what you're seeing as far as occupancy rate on the two short-term rentals that you have. Are they pretty much always booked?
Every weekend they're booked. I mean, there's not a weekend that isn't booked. During the week, we do have some bookings. It just kind of depends. I will tell you on our Main Street property that occupancy rate. Now, these are a little skewed because they're new. Both of them are relatively new. That occupancy rate is 48%, and it's getting higher and higher. And then the one on Webster that literally just opened, our first guest is in there right now. So it's kind of, we expect it to be in that 50 to 60%. I will also tell you that when we decided to do this, the amount of money that we have in these properties, if we had to, we could flip these to long-term rentals and they'd still be okay. That's the safe thing to do, because if your short-term rental business plan doesn't work out, you don't want to be figuring 3 to 4 times revenue and not getting it just to cover your bills. So I didn't talk about that, but really your short-term rental should bring in about 3 to 4 times in revenue what a long-term rental would bring in. That's kind of where you want to be. The long-term rental, I don't know, there's the 1% method that you look at, which is your rent should be about 1% of the purchase price. That's a very quick general test. And then there's a 50% method that I could go over in a whole different conversation, which is a more detailed and conservative way to analyze a long-term rental. When you come up with those numbers, you can almost times that by 3 to 4, and that's about what a short-term rental should bring you. Just if you're thinking about that.
Let me ask a question about location.
Okay.
Does the location of a short-term rental, meaning Midtown, Hamilton versus out in the quote suburbs, make a difference?
I think it does to a certain degree. If it's walkable to downtown, I think it makes a big difference. So our Main Street property is kind of right down where Edgewood and Main hit. So you can walk to Main Street, and we actually do have a good amount of guests walk to Main Street from there. In our welcome book, we have 3 pages of all the local businesses, all the restaurants and shopping that are in the High and Main district, with a QR code that they can scan to get their menu and about their shop. And it'll tell them if it's walkable or not from that property. So we do have a good amount of people, because that's one of our follow-up questions that we send out automatically. We asked why they were in town, what they enjoyed. Did they walk to Main Street while they were in town? And we do get a good amount of people. So I think if it's close enough to where it's walkable, it does help out a little bit. That being said, I mean, there's short-term rentals all over Hamilton that aren't walkable that are still doing well. It all goes back to the amenities.
Jeff, I have a question.
Yeah.
One thing, I'm going to make an assumption. I assume that you promote the Explore Hamilton app in all your rentals. So
we actually do. We have a QR code that links it right to their website, right to that, to download the app.
Great, perfect response.
Yeah.
But my real question is, what other trends are you seeing other than, a huge increase in, the number of short-term rentals? As far as I know, there's been a lot of debate online anyway about additional fees and cleaning fees and, fees that people didn't expect and that type of thing when they book. I mean, are you seeing that still occurring, or is that just kind of how the industry's changed? And
so I think a lot of this goes back to Airbnb, because Vrbo's works differently. Booking.com works a little bit differently. Their platforms are a little more upfront about the fees than what traditionally Airbnb has been. So the way Airbnb works is you see your nightly rates. And then when you go to book it, it tells you what the host fee is. And by host, I mean Airbnb, they charge a 14% fee, and then the cleaning fee. So you don't see that till late in the process. They are changing that now to where you can actually go in and default to show the entire price as you go and price it, which is okay. I don't have a problem with that. As long as everyone's on an equal playing field, because the fees are what they are. You know, we've had in conversations, we've had some people be like, how do you feel okay charging $1,000 a night or $500 a night for a house? Well, think about it for a minute. If you have, because especially Main Street, it has 4 bedrooms and 9 beds. If you have 6 to 9 people staying in that property, that's 3 or 4 hotel rooms they're going to have to rent. So $600 a night is probably cheap compared to what 3 or 4 hotel rooms would be. The other part of it is, look at the amount of money that goes into these properties. Like Main Street has a $300,000 investment. Okay. That's a lot of money that you've got to make back on these. So it's not like you're making $500 a night profit. Like that just isn't realistic, but you get people that think that you're doing that. So once you explain to them, like, this is really kind of where it is, and this is how much money that went into it, this is our profit margin, that's a whole different conversation to have.
My other question, Jeff, is do you see a change in the expectation of people that are, staying in the short-term rentals? Like as far as amenities and stuff like that?
So, I don't know if we've been doing this long enough to be able to answer that accurately. I do know people are extremely appreciative of a few things that we have in the Main Street property. The foosball table, they love. Their kids play it all the time. I think even some adults play it from time to time. We have board games in all of ours that are used every single time. And we know because they're left out, they're not put back the way that we originally had them. But I think the biggest thing people are looking for, they just want it super clean. Like that's a must. It has to be clean, and it has to be an easy process for them to get in and out. Those are extremely important.
I know you covered this early on, living on the East Coast for years, like shore rentals and that type of thing, that's been, a thing for
Correct.
generations, and it's just an accepted, and there's no issues with it. And, they've gotten past all that. Do you think that we will see that more in our area? And I know Hamilton has not really been a barrier to short-term rentals, but do you think where, residents and stuff are not nearly as concerned because it's the norm?
I do. I think it's education more than anything else. If you look at, there's just like anything else, there are good short-term rental owners or managers, and there are not so good short-term rental owners and managers. And the not so good ones give everyone else a bad reputation, right? If they're not keeping a property up, or they're allowing parties and it's causing all kinds of problems, that's the perception that people get. Realistically, we have not had any issues. And I will tell you, those 2 houses are probably the nicest ones on the street. I guarantee you inside they are, and they will be eventually outside. I think the Main Street property, we have to put new siding on it, which we'll do this year. But those are virtually brand new houses. Everything about them is brand new. So the value of those compared to what some of the adjacent properties are, like I know the one on Main, the house next to it's probably worth half of what this one's worth. But it's virtually a brand new house. So I think when people learn that no, people aren't throwing big parties there, there's not a lot of noise. It's not like people are coming and going nonstop. We just don't have the issues that a lot of people think that Airbnbs are going to have in the neighborhood. And most of the time, we all know this, when you start to fix a property up, that kind of gets contagious with some of the neighbors sometimes, and then they will start to fix theirs up over time. So I think it will, after we've gone through this for a while, I think people will start to be a little more okay with them. I know there's a lot of issues with parking, which Hamilton has pretty much dealt with that, at least to my knowledge, if I remember right. When you request permission for a short-term rental, it has to have off-street parking. And that, while it's important to guests, that's just as important to all the neighbors around. Because you don't want a bunch of cars parked on the street all the time. It just doesn't look great. People aren't happy with it. So I think off-street parking is a big thing for both guests and for neighbors.
Then I have one last question and then I'll shut up.
You're fine.
Do you, and I know that you haven't been in this for a long period of time, but what is the return rate as far as same people coming back, time after time after time?
So like I said, we have not been doing this for a lot of our guests say they will stay with us again when they come back. We have systems in place to when they are in our short-term rentals, they scan to get some information on the area. And when they do that, we get their email information. So then we can email market to them all the different things that are going on in Hamilton. Like, hey, Operation Pumpkin's coming up. If you're coming, we'd love for you to come and stay with us again. So we can literally market the events that are going on in Hamilton just to try and get them to come back to stay in our Airbnb. That's one of the things that we do that I know not a lot of other people do, is try and capture that contact information. But that allows us to market them and get them to come back. And most of our guests do tell us that they would love to come back and stay with us again. Any other questions?
Yes, you covered it all, Jeff.
Actually, I have
Yep.
one.
Dan has one.
Dan's got another.
What should, if anything, permanent neighbors of Airbnb properties do?
I think they should talk to the owners and have the owner set the expectation and have the neighbor set their expectation of what should be going on and not be going on in that Airbnb. I think as long as the owner and the neighbor are on the same page, the issue is going to be extremely minimal. But that conversation has to happen. If it doesn't happen, you've got two different people that don't know what the other one expects. There's going to be some issues.
And I know you had mentioned that you do that, but how many other Airbnb owners actually initiate that conversation?
This is a complete guess, but if I had to say, probably 20%, probably not a lot. And even if they do have a conversation with the neighbors, a lot of times it's not intentional. They're not asking the right questions. It's, hey, I'm opening this thing up as an Airbnb. Here's all my contact information. First of all, I want to let you know that if you ever have any issues with what's going on here, I want you to call me directly. What time do you have young kids, and what time do your young kids go to bed? Well, that tells us when to set quiet time. Like, let's start to have those conversations with them and find out like what would make them happy and find that happy medium between the two.
I mean, would really be value. It's an Airbnb close to where I live, and we've had no issues other than parking, and no real issues until 2 weeks ago when the residents came in, parked their cars side by side, and blocked the alley and went to bed. So, it was kind of like, and I mean, we had to go out the other side of the alley, but I mean, that's a good point because we didn't know who to call. It's like, do we call the police? Do we, like, what do we do? Because if there was an emergency, we're kind of out of luck here. So.
Yeah. And that would have been solved if they would have come and introduced themselves to you and you had their contact information. So I think that's a big part of it, because I would rather them call me and tell me there's an issue going on before they call the police.
Right.
100%. I just
Well,
don't
that's
want
the
the
thing.
police there at all.
Yeah, you hate to have somebody with out-of-state plates, and now the police are knocking on their door at midnight, and then it's like, but
Yes.
we were like, well, we hope they move the car soon. So
Yeah. Yes. And when you register through the city, at least the police will have a way to get a hold of you. But I'd rather that neighbor call me directly and say, hey, can you take care of this? And a lot of that comes with communication between the host and the guest. If you went on and booked either one of our Airbnbs, in our welcome book, there's a map, an aerial view of the neighborhood with red lines and parking instructions and where you can and can't park, where over there off of Webster, where the one-way streets are at. And then you get another notification 2 hours before you arrive with the same information and a map showing you where you need to go, where you need to park, and where you can't park. You know how it is. People don't read everything, so you got to send it to them multiple different times. But if they would have been told multiple times, don't block the alley, don't block the alley, they probably wouldn't have blocked the alley. You would hope.
I guess my request to you would be, as you have relationships and contact with other short-term rental owners, that would be a really great message to convey that, just make sure that the neighbors and even a couple doors away, know, when it's going to become an Airbnb. And, I think it just make people, like I said, I haven't really had any issues, the one down the alley for me,
Mhm.
except for that. But you do, just like that, it's like, well, we don't even know who to call. So,
Yeah.
I
And
think,
it could be as simple as sending a letter out to all the adjacent neighbors saying, hey, please call me to discuss this. This is what we're doing.
right.
At least they have the letter with your contact information, even if you've never talked to them. So yeah, that's one of those things where in our last investor meeting for our investor group, we did talk about this a little bit. I don't know if Tyler has reached out to you about membership yet. Okay. So once that happens, then we can start the actual short-term rental investor group that we had talked about as an organization. So that's getting closer and closer to actually happen. And these are that's a great example of kind of a conversation that we could have in one of those meetings like that. Just best practices.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other last questions?
All right, Jeff, would you like to share your contact information in case anybody has any questions in the future and they'd like to get in contact with you?
I can. So my email address is jeff@jeffboylegroup.com. It's JEFFBOYLE group.com. Phone number is 513-295-5750. You can find us on Facebook under JBG Homes, and you can find us on Instagram and TikTok under JBG Real Estate Advisors. So you can message us on any of those platforms. We're on YouTube also under the same tagline. So we're pretty easy to find. If you just Google my name, it'll come up. Being a realtor, my name and phone numbers out there everywhere. So I'm not hard to find, but yes, feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. I love talking investing. I love talking real estate. So be glad to help out in any way.
Hey,
That's perfect.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Gino.
Yeah, great information, Jeff. I really appreciate you jumping on. Can you share your deck maybe with Laura so that anybody needs it? Maybe we can, send it out to people that
I
might
sure can.
look at us from the Facebook page or whatever. I think it's great information, not only for people that want to invest, but also kind of what Dan was saying, people that live in neighborhoods where a short-term rental is coming into play. Maybe we can have that conversation with the people.
Oh yeah, I would encourage you to, by all means, try and catch them when they're there and have those conversations with them.
Absolutely.
For everybody on, this will also go on our YouTube. So if anybody wants to watch it or share it after, they can also do that as well.
Yep. So
Thanks for
we'll have
coming,
that
everybody.
on YouTube probably this afternoon for everyone. And then it's already been on Facebook. So if you've got any questions, you can always jump on there and watch it there. We'll be back on May 23rd. Michael Sutter is our speaker that day. He's with Enliven Tech, and he's going to be discussing end-of-life data security. That it's a critical component in the IT life cycle stream. So if you're disposing of data-filled devices, what are the proper precautions you need to take? You certainly don't want your information out there. You want to make sure that you've secured, especially if it's a company laptop or something like that, device, phones, make sure all these things are wiped. So join us on May 23rd, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. with Michael. And we'll see you all in a couple weeks. Thank you so much, Jeff.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.